Howdy. I am at the Dynon and Advanced Flight Systems booth here with Kyle. Kyle, wanted you to introduce yourself, kind of go over what you have to offer here, and then I'm going to pick your brain, like the average builder, I guess, would, if they're going to be thinking about putting such a beautiful panel in their airplane.
All right, great. My name's Kyle George. I've worked for Dynon and Advanced Flight Systems now for about 6 years. I used to work in the certified sales division, and now I work through the advanced panel part of our company. We do a combination of manufacturing our own line of EFS. We do avionics configuration for customers with our advanced control module, and we also build complete panels, just like the one you see here, which is an RV8.
So if someone was going to purchase one of these or start the build process and planning process, are you the point of contact that they would have and be working with?
That is what I do, and I'll be handing out business cards. We also have a place where folks can sign up for a one-on-one consult with me on our website, advancedflightsystems.com or advancedpanel.store. What I usually do is sit down for a 30 to 45 minute either phone or video call, one-on-one without the noise of everything else going on here. Figure out what is your mission, where are you at in your project, how can we help you the most, what's the best offer, and we usually put together 2 or 3 different kind of quote varieties to compare. Here's option 1, option 2, option 3. Let's figure out what the best way to do it is.
Okay, so then this panel here, I'm thinking is an RV8 panel.
Correct.
But can you show kind of what you got, like
Sure.
how these screens work,
Sure.
or I guess what people would expect?
Well, there's a lot in a very small panel, which amazingly we can fit into the RV8. We have 2 10-inch EFSs. These are the advanced 6600s. Then above that we have an Avidyne IFD 440, which is an IFR, NavCom, and GPS. These 2 EFSs are really 2 of the same thing. At this moment, they're showing you 3 different pieces of information. I've got primary flight display, I've got engine monitoring, and I have moving map. But with 2 fingers, I can swipe these screens around and display all kinds of other information. So right there, in a couple gestures, we've made them mirror images of each other. Or maybe I like the PFD on the other side, so I just want it to be a mirror image. The advanced EFSs have quite a few serial ports, especially with multiple screens. That allows you to interface a lot more things. It gives you the option to run some comms headless. You'll notice there's no audio panel in this instrument panel right here, and that's because it's remote. We have an audio panel interface that supports up to a 6-place intercom, has dual Bluetooth. It's made by PS Engineering. That can be a panel-mounted device with buttons and a knob and a screen, or it can be a remote box that doesn't take up any panel space, which sometimes, like this panel, is important. We interface with Avidyne and Garmin navigators, as well as Trigs and a handful of others. Depending if you're retrofitting your airplane, we try to get a good photo of your airplane panel and see what all is there. There are a lot of things often that we can integrate with that you've already got in the panel. Other times people are starting from scratch or just want to gut the whole thing. So sometimes it's a ground up build, sometimes it's figuring out what roles we can fill.
I know my understanding is Dynon product, Advanced Flight Systems product, they have the same inner workings when it comes to generally display, but what other differences can someone expect choosing Dynon versus an AFS panel?
Sure. Yes, you're right. Everything behind the scenes is pretty much the same between the 2 systems. Dynon acquired Advanced Flight Systems coming up on 10 years ago, and we've harmonized the hardware behind the scenes that run everything. What's different still is the size and shape, the look and feel, the user interface, the gestures, and things like that. There's an architectural difference between the 2 platforms that often sways one way or the other depending on some of your needs, and that's serial ports. Each screen has a total of 5 serial ports. In the Skyview platform, we've gone for maximum redundancy. So screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, all 3 of those serial ports are tied to the same thing. So if I were to lose one EFS, the other one picks up all the duties the other one had, just specifically with serial ports. With Advanced, we've gone more for being able to integrate with more things. So this screen has 5 serial ports, and this screen has 5 serial ports, and an Ethernet cable between them shares the data back and forth. So this panel has a total of 10 options for interfacing with things. We have more formats that are able to interface with things like an audio panel. We're able to tune and control radios and Avidyne and Garmin navigators. We're able to feed them fuel consumption data so that their range computations are all working. Or we're able to feed traffic and weather into at least the Avidyne platform. It also gives you the option to run our comm radio headless. So you don't have to have this panel. If it's your number 2 radio, the second radio is pretty common to see headless. In this case, we're showing off our new OLED comm head panel, so we made sure to put it in there. Size and shape sometimes is a driver as well. Most of us want to put as much glass as we can fit into the panel. The advanced screens are just a hair larger and a different shape. 3x4 or 4x3 ratio compared to 16x9. That little extra screen space we get lets us put a whole extra line of data over here at the top. So it brings more to the surface that's visible at once.
Fantastic. Okay, so I guess breaking down the serial port thing. So going into this, I know nothing. First time builder. So serial ports kind of confusing from the beginning. My understanding is like, say, carbon monoxide detector could be a serial port. So each of those items is a serial port. Is that the best?
To really over distill it, think of a serial port as a USB port. And the more ports you've got on the hub, the more devices you can plug in and do things with.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it comes to IFR. So I'm not instrument rated yet. I do intend on getting instrument rated.
Wonderful.
I'm likely going to try to do it before completing the build. I understand insurance companies don't like non-IFR certified RV10 pilots.
Sure.
Knowing that, how do you generally approach this conversation with people who are at my stage of a build?
Well, the first question I usually ask, you've already answered, which is, are you IFR rated? Because a lot of it comes down to understanding, once you've taken some of the IFR training, at least ground school, to understand the differences in how the different navigation systems work. That makes you understand what equipment, or helps you understand what equipment you might buy to get what capabilities you want. So there are two common means of navigation in today's new avionics world. Ground-based nav aids, where most of us are familiar with VORs and ILS approaches, and then GPS. GPS is far more prolific these days. I think it's 5 to 1 or so, the number of RNAV approaches compared to the number of ILSs. Very, very, very small number of airports in the country now have instrument landing ILS landing capability, but that don't have a GPS approach. So there's almost nowhere a nav radio is going to get you that a GPS won't. Now, the reason I point that out is because there's a huge price difference between a navigation device that is only a GPS versus the one that is a GPS with a nav radio as well. What we've got right here is the Avidyne IFD 440, arguably our most popular navigator choice. It's kind of the middle of the road. It's fully capable. It's all three. It's a nav radio, comm radio, and GPS. Not super huge, but big enough to use. These are also slide-in replacements for the Garmin 430, which is a very popular instrument. So the fact that it goes right in is very attractive to a lot of people. So understanding what the different parts of IFR is and gauging that to your mission. We get a lot of customers that are, former military and airline pilots that are very comfortable operating in the IFR environment. They want to have their panel able to do everything. So it's got a full-blown navigator. A lot of our customer base as well, very light in their IFR mission. Most of our, single-engine piston airplanes built in our garage are not necessarily the best platform for IFR. Many of them are operated IFR and done so very, very well. But as a platform, many of our customers prefer generally VFR with a light sprinkle of IFR for a little flavor. So GPS-only navigators are easily 50% of the IFR panels that we do not have the nav radio as well. And that's about a half of the price cost savings in the IFR navigator world. GPS navigators from either Garmin or Avidyne are in the $5,000 to $6,000 range as just a GPS. Once it's combined all three into one box, you're north of $12,000 and beyond for bigger screens and things like that. So a lot of times it's a cost driver. In many cases too, we're preparing a panel for eventually having an IFR navigator there. We may cut this hole and have a 3D printed cap on there that you can then add the IFR navigator later. Projects, as will probably not surprise you, have a funny way of going over time and over budget, and sometimes it's a race just to get the thing in the air. I don't need 2 comms, I don't need 2 EFISes, I don't need IFR capability to get my airplane off the ground and start working on flying off my task-based or my 40 hours. So you can delay a lot of investment, you can have the panel ready for those things to go in. Our advanced control module supports plug-and-play addition of these things down the road, and we can build all the harnesses at whatever fits your schedule.
Fantastic. Okay, so part of we've not honed in on a specific unit that we want to go with. My thought process after being at AirVenture here for the first time and kind of touching the Garmin options, touching the Avidyne options. Plan right now, I think for ours, is we'll do a IFD 410. Okay. Because my understanding is that the back cage here that it slides into, if I ever want to in the future, say I regret that decision, it should fit right back in that same mount.
Correct.
Versus the other process, which I think we've chatted about in the past, of the Garmin offering, which if it's GPS only, you cannot just upgrade that to.
It's not quite the same simple matter.
It's just a different cutout where it's a different commitment down the road. Is that what you're finding as well?
Absolutely. The Avidynes, very smartly have targeted the 430, 530 replacement markets. They have a large and a small platform that fit in the same mounting tray that have been in airplanes since the 90s. So it's a very common platform, a very standard platform, and their modules are, the same physical form factor, whether it's the GPS only or the GPS Navcom. So the harness could be built as though it were the full-blown 440. If you just get the 410 and then down the road you decide, I do want the extra capability. 410 could come out, 440 could go in, and it would all be wired and ready to go.
And then as far as RV10 goes, you guys released a really neat thing, I think it was this last year, right, with the total airframe harness, the wiring harness. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. I've started offering a generically built airframe harness for the masses, pinned out where it plugs into our control module behind the panel, and then an entire spiral cord that has enough length to reach the right and left wingtip and the tail, including lights, pitot heat, ELT, autopilot servos, roll trim, pitch trim, flaps, and so on. For the RV10, the RV7, and the RV9, we have gotten as far as having a more precisely engineered for that airplane model, where we've worked out the length from the panel to the wing roots and all the way to the tail. There's a little bit of extra wire there, but then we have a separable wing harness that is buildable to the wing, and you can order it by itself. So when you're working on the wings, you can get the wing harness, put the wing wiring in, skin the wings, set those aside. Then when you're working on the fuselage, you can get the mating end of that harness, and when the wings meet the airplane, a quick connector goes together and your wings are wired.
And that was one of the appealing things when I saw that announcement come up of why we want to incorporate NARS. So kind of there with a fun channel announcement, we have chosen to go with AFS and Dynon as brand ambassadors, and I'm really looking forward to incorporating that whole setup, because my understanding is I don't have to buy the displays right away, which is huge for us as buy as you go type builders. That's our intention here, is to buy that whole wiring harness, buy as we go and as it's needed, which the whole goal here is to document that on our YouTube channel and hopefully provide some really good content for other people who are considering it. So really excited to get that incorporated in our build. So make sure you're subscribed, follow along, and we'll definitely be making a lot of really fun videos there. But I guess last question for you, support-wise, I know that's a big item or big top of mind with a lot of builders. Some companies are really hard to get a hold of, some are not. You guys, what is the support system there?
We are on the much easier spectrum to get a hold of. I'm not saying we don't have busy days and you have to leave a voicemail and wait for someone to call you back. That happens, but we don't go home at the end of the day until we've called every voicemail back, or at least tried to. We have several full-time support technicians. We are not bashful about sending replacements when needed. Our guys are mostly builders themselves, and where I in sales know how things are supposed to work, the guys in support know how to make them work when they're not behaving. So we've got some great guys that have worked through just about every problem you can imagine. If you can stump them, you're in a badge.
Well, I will try my best on that note. And looking forward to it. So again, subscribe, follow along, and watch us build our panel. And haven't made all the critical decisions yet, but you guys will subscribe, follow along, and follow our journey. So thanks again, Kyle.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Good to see us.